Thank you. Good evening. I don't think the microphones are on. Are they on? Can you hear me? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We're having a little technical difficulty here with the microphone, so give us a second. I'm sure you can all hear me fine in here, but I want to make sure that the folks who are watching at home can also hear, so.
If I may, Madam Chair, last week we had a meeting in here, and they had put the microphones out in the center, so they shut off the sound so there wasn't any feedback. So I'm guessing that it wasn't turned back up at the end of that meeting. So that's what the delay is.
Thank you for that explanation. I'll try to speak loudly enough for you to hear me and know that everybody at home can hear me at least. Good evening and welcome to the February 8th, 2011 Town of Wareham Board of Selectmen Sewer Commissioners meeting. May I have a roll call, please, Mr. Cruz?
Yes, Madam Chair. For all four selectmen are present, Mr. Steve Holmes is absent, plus Town Administrator Mark Andrews.
Thank you. Do we have any announcements? Oh, we do have one announcement. I just want to remind people that this Saturday is the Love Your Library rally. It starts at 10 a.m. and will go until 1 p.m. Encouraged to come down to the library, speak to your state representatives, Senator Mark Pacheco and Representative Susan Williams Gifford. Try to get them convinced of what they already know, I think, but libraries need more money. So come down and show your support. There we go. Surprise. Does anyone else have any announcements? No? Okay. We have citizens' participation. Is there anyone who would like to speak before the board this evening? Ms. Martin, up front.
Hi, Eleanor Martin. I'm president of the Onset Bay Association, and I'm here representing Mary Lou Payton, who was the past president of the Onset Bay Association, and she is very upset that she couldn't get here tonight, but she had a slip and fall this week and has a torn rotator cuff, so she's going to be out for a while. But she asked me to read this letter to you. It's addressed to the Board of Selectmen, Town of Wareham. Good evening. I truly regret not personally being able to attend and speak on behalf of Town Administrator Mark Andrews. I recently slipped on the ice and now have a torn rotator cuff and am unable to be present. For the past 17 years, during my involvement with the Onset Bay Association as president and as a member of the Board of Directors, I have had contact with the past 5 town administrators. I am happy to report that working with Mr. Andrews has been a unique and positive experience. Mark actively sought out members of the community and worked to establish a better understanding of its needs and wants. His Summer Safety Initiative is a perfect example of the municipal department heads of the Onset Bay Association, Wareham Village Association, and the Wareham Garden Club meeting weekly to review the needs of the various scheduled events. While current economic challenges frequently required sometimes severe financial discipline, Mr. Andrews did his best to make the most of the opportunity and encouraged us to do the same. As they have so many times in the past, there is no question that Wareham and Onset will come through these challenging times. I am convinced, however, that the journey will be better for the citizens and guests alike by having the continuous input and guidance provided by Mark Andrews as Town Administrator. Sincerely, Mary Lou Payton. And I'd just like to add for myself, although I'm new at being the president of the Onset Bay, I have been active in the association for the past 3 years, and I have seen the difference just recently that working with Mr. Andrews has made for the town. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Could we have a copy of that letter?
Certainly.
Ms. Lindsay, did you want to speak?
Yes, pretty much in full agreement with Mary Lou. We have worked so well together with all the department heads, the Onset Bay Association, Mr. Andrews. He has shown a tremendous amount of his expertise and finesse and pride in our community, and he is moving us in the right direction. He works diligently tending to all the needs of our residents when they call, and our merchants, and trying to make them as successful as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak during citizens' participation this evening? Mrs. Bronk?
Yeah, I'd like to take this opportunity to give kudos to Mr. Andrews for his leadership throughout this last year. He came in at a very difficult time, and as being chairman of the Finance Committee, he's been responsive, and his whole team has been responsive. Everyone has, and I want to thank you for your hard work. And I know people don't often say you're doing a good job. We're always telling you what you're doing wrong, but we do appreciate your hard work and the hard work of your team, and we look forward to you continuing your operation here in Wareham.
Thank you, Mrs. Bronk. Is there anyone else who wanted to speak before citizens' participation? Mrs. Furler?
Hi, I'm Kate Furler, and I'm from the Swifts Beach area, and I am the liaison for the Swifts Beach homeowners, no, not the homeowners, the Improvement Association. And I, too, want to praise Mr. Andrews.
Okay, great. How many other people are here to praise Mr. Andrews? Thank you. Thank you. We do appreciate your good words of support. I'd like to encourage people to send your words of encouragement, support to the board in writing. It's great that we have, so much popular support for Mr. Andrews. His performance under the contract does fall under our purview, and we are responsible for evaluating him. And again, we appreciate. I know you want to say one more thing, so, and then I'm gonna ask the rest of the folks to, like I said.
We've had a number of issues that we needed to talk with Mr. Andrews about, and he has been very responsive and very timely in solving small problems that we have had. And the major thing that is quite wonderful at Swifts Beach right now is that he's getting the streets plowed. So thank you. Thank
you, Mrs. Furler. And again, to the rest of you who came this evening to say a few words for Mr. Andrews, the board appreciates your input, and if you could send us an email, that would be great. In the interest of expediency, I really like to move the meeting along. And again, I thank you for coming. I hope you're not too disappointed that that I'm not giving you time to speak. But one gentleman who really, this gentleman in the front would like to say one. Okay, we'll let one gentleman since we've favored the ladies. I don't want to be accused of discrimination.
Good evening, everyone. Larry Gaines with the Friends of Wareham's Elderly. Ditto, we will send a letter of recommendation. What is the time limit on that?
There's no real time limit, just
I don't know when the evaluations
as
would be done.
soon as you
so-
can. I'm going to be putting before the board this evening whether or not they would like to have the evaluation done next week when Mr. Holmes will be able to be with us, or if they would prefer to move forward. So I'm not sure, Mr. Gaines, whether we'll be doing tonight or next week, probably.
Okay. The other reason I'm here is making an announcement for this weekend. On the Friends are holding a fundraiser, something a little different for a change. We're doing a wine tasting after the other event that's earlier in the day at Brown's package store. And the benefits to us, of course, is they're going to share the profits that they make off of the sales of the wines that they sell during the wine tasting, so that we can buy some more cards and more bus passes, etc., like we normally do for the seniors. And it will go from 3 to 6. There's no charge for the participation of whoever wants to go to attend the wine tasting. We are asking for a donation of $5 for 7 tickets to win a basket with 3 bottles of wine of a value of $30. And that's all. And we ditto everything that's been said about Mr. Andrews.
Thank you, Mr. Gaines. Is there anyone who would like to come before citizens' participation for any other reason? Would you like to come forward and identify yourself for the record, please?
Martha Strawn, Chairman of the Council of Aging. I just wanted to give a friendly reminder. I know there is posting, but we have the District Attorney for Plymouth County coming on December 14th for 10:30 a.m. presentation, which I highly recommend, talking about default and talking about fraud for seniors, and I think it's very beneficial. So I'm hoping it will have a very good turnout. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for that reminder. Anyone else? Thank you. Mr. Cruz, we have some bills.
Yes, Madam Chair, we have 2 bills before us. The first one is from CDM. It's partial payment number 8, contractor Gioso and Sons at Sprague Street, Hyde Park. It's for time period October 1st to October 31st, 2010. Contract number 2, project number CWSRF 3022, estimate number 8, for $375,988.55. So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? It's 4-0-0.
Next one's from CDM also. It's for Gioso and Sons, partial payment number 9, from time period November 1st to November 30, 2010. Contract number 2, project number CWSRF 3022, estimate number 9 for $435,722.72. So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? It's 4-0-0. Thank you, Mr. Cruz.
You're welcome, Madam Chair.
The next item on the agenda this evening is interviews for the Westfield Review and Recommendation Committee. Is Mr. Richard Boucher here, please? Come forward and have a seat. Explain your interest to the board and the public being on the Westfield Review and Recommendation Committee.
As a proponent for the project and as a member of the Westfield Review Committee, I'd like to see the project through. So I have a lot of interest in it. I have a lot of knowledge about the Westfield Review Committee's recommendations, why we incorporated recreation fields into it, and how that would incorporate itself into the senior affordable living project. Secondly, my background is in security and fire alarm systems. 2.5 years ago, I retired from a security and fire alarm system on Cape Cod, and in particular, as a licensed installer of commercial fire alarm systems, we were certified to approve plans for various builders throughout the Cape area and submit them on their behalf to the various town authorities that would approve them. With my knowledge of life safety systems in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, both from the fire aspect, carbon monoxide, ADA laws, etc., I think it's important that someone be on the committee who can speak to those issues to any builder that submits a proposal. One of the key things in terms of cost to the town is not so much the upfront cost. Typically on a project of this scale, the electrical contractor on the job would be installing the life safety systems. However, at the conclusion of the project, they walk away from it, and it becomes the responsibility of a hired security alarm system for both monitoring, but more important, ongoing annual inspections, and more important than that, emergency service requirements. One thing the town should be aware of is that they don't want to get themselves locked into proprietary equipment. No matter who the manufacturer of the equipment installed is, pretty much the quality of that equipment is standardized. There are UL requirements, FM requirements, etc., that have to be met by any manufacturer in order to sell that equipment anywhere in the country. The big thing is that there are certain pieces of equipment, and I'll use Simplex as an example. That's something you see on a lot of commercial developments. It's a proprietary system. It's serviced only by the manufacturer and or a licensed installer. The problem with it is that it can't be handled by anyone who isn't authorized, and there are very few people who are authorized outside of the manufacturer, and their costs are extraordinary. And I'll give you an example. If it's Simplex, which is a company out of Rhode Island, if you need emergency service, you're going to pay $165 an hour from the point the serviceman leaves his office in Rhode Island. You're paying that kind of hourly rate while he travels here, performs his work, and then travels back home. It's ridiculous. Equipment needs to be installed that can be serviced by any licensed installer who is competent in his job. It should be somebody local. By that I mean someone within the southeastern Massachusetts area or within eastern Massachusetts at the very least, and there are several good ones. Even though I'm retired from the business, I'm not making a recommendation of my old company because this is outside of their geographical territory that they're serviced, so there's no conflict of interest here whatsoever. But the key is that these systems need annual inspections and certification to the local authorities at the fire department. But more important, they need maintenance. And that can be an extraordinary cost. Now, I know that it's the developer that's going to be paying those costs. But any cost that the developer will incur down the road is going to affect the rents that they charge. So there's lots of hidden elements within these types of projects that you have to be aware of. The elevator company that's used is another key. I'm not an expert in that, but again, that needs to be investigated with any developer that is hired as to who it will be. Again, like the life safety systems, they have to be inspected annually, and when they break down, they need quick service at an affordable cost. So that's what I've got to say about that.
Thank you. For questions for Mr. Boucher, I'll start with Mrs. Ekstrom, please.
Thank you. Okay. Have you had a chance to look at the RFP that we have?
I've never seen the original RFP, no.
Okay. And how long do you think that this process will take from the time you guys started to getting out the RFP?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I thought I read in the paper the other day that there's already a deadline set for that from the time that the committee is formed to the time that a revised RFP is submitted.
Well, we had a discussion, the Board of Selectmen had a discussion as it, so I'm just trying to get an idea of what people that come up think that timeline would be.
Well, all I know about the original RFP is that it was submitted. And I do understand that there are modifications that have to be met, such as the sewer system. It's going to need to be an on-site sewer system, and the recreational aspect of it. I know, being a part of the Westfield Review Committee, exactly what our vision was for that additional phase of the project. And I think that at least one person who has an understanding of that needs to be on this committee.
And let's see. One of the things that the Board of Selectmen had talked about is having a representative of the review committee coming and appearing before the board on a weekly basis to give us updates and to address any issues. Do you have any problem with that?
No.
Okay. All right, those are my questions. I'm sorry, and is someone, one of you guys going to ask Steve?
Why don't you go ahead and ask
okay.
Mr. Holmes' question, please?
And I won't do it justice because we were trying to figure out exactly what his was, but essentially what it was is that, what is your experience with RFPs? Are you familiar with them? Have you ever written them, reviewed them, anything like that?
No, my experience is what I told you
Okay.
regarding life safety systems.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Winslow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have one question for you, same question that Mr. Holmes asked for me last week, and that is, what is the one accomplishment or project or something that you've been involved in that makes you the best candidate to sit on this committee?
Well, as a business owner and a retired business owner at age 59, my accomplishments regarding that speak for themselves. On the Cape, in terms of, again, getting back to my experience with the fire codes and life safety codes and federal ADA codes that we dealt with, my company was the largest installer of security and fire alarm systems on the Cape Cod proper.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Cruz?
No, Madam Chair, I don't have anything.
Mr. Boucher, as a member of the Westfield Review Committee, prior member of the Westfield, the review committee that brought this forward, what do you see as your personal vision for the outcome of this project?
Well, I think it's obvious to the majority of people that affordable living for seniors in this community is a dire need. I've heard some arguments that the fact that 100% of the residents won't be Wareham residents is a problem. However, in answer to that, it's quite possible for 100% of the residents to be Wareham residents if Wareham wants to take on the cost of the project itself and borrow the money and simply hire a contractor to build it without relying on federal or state funds, which is where the requirement for non-town residents coming in. So it's a kind of a moot point. We need housing for seniors. We need affordable housing for seniors. More importantly, we need decent housing for seniors.
And it says here on your application that you were on the Council of Aging Board of Directors?
Was
That's right.
at the time.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions for Mr. Boucher. Anybody have any oh-by-the-ways? Thank you for your time on the
Thank you very much.
Westfield Committee and for offering to continue on with your expertise. The next candidate we have this evening is Mr. Bruce Savageau. Would you come forward, please? Mrs. Ekstrom, I'll start with you again.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Madam Chair and Board, and Mr. Andrews.
Would you like to give us a little bit of...
Sure. Well, I have been very passionate about this project since its very beginnings. Its inception. In fact, I was there for the the seminal moment that this project actually became an idea when I was the Board of Selectmen liaison to the CETA board. CETA was applying originally for its 5-year block grant, and in order to qualify for that grant, the town needed an updated housing plan. And the CETA board, and when I was the liaison to the CETA board, met and discussed how to develop a housing plan. And we looked at a lot of properties, town-owned properties. We looked at private properties, invited several private property owners to potentially donate for a tax incentive or sell at a low value. And eventually, the only conceivable land that would sustain a project of this size was what's now known as the Westfield property. So that was the original beginnings of this project. From there, there was a housing committee that was formed, and I became a member of that committee, a voting member. That committee studied the actual components and the structure of a housing development that we now know as Westfield. That's how the property was identified. This was not a Board of Selectmen plan originally. It was not a CETA plan originally. It was a Department of Housing and Community Development requirement. And that's how the original plan was formulated and how we are really at this point in this stage. So I have been with this project for well over 5 years. I have been through all phases of where we are in terms of developing the original language with other members of the board for the warrant articles, all 3 reiterations. I was, as part of the Board of Selectmen, involved in the hiring and continued collaboration with the consultant, Mr. Heaton, that advised the board. And I had been through the RFP process in all of its various stages multiple times now. So I think I bring an institutional knowledge and a historical knowledge about this project that would be very valuable to the committee and would be valuable to the board in our advisory role to the board as a committee.
Thank you. Mrs. Ekstrom.
Thank you. Now, I know you had the opportunity to actually work on the RFP, but have you had a chance to look at it recently, or?
I've read it several times.
Okay.
Not only this last reiteration, but the original, when we had the assisted living component that we had to give up. So this would be the 3rd RFP document, if you will, that we would need to devise.
All right, and what do you think the most important component of the RFP is?
Well, I think there's not one most important. I think there are 3 critical components to the RFP that we're going to need to spend a particular time on. First is the new recreational component. That's very important because that language in the RFP is going to be the basis of the contract language in the contract between the developer and the town. So who will actually develop, to what extent, the new grounds, and who will be responsible for the ongoing management, whether that's the management company or the developer, and what will be some of the contract terms and conditions, such as who will sublet those fields, under what terms and conditions, what liability will the town have, and so forth. So that's going to be very important. Sewer was mentioned. Maybe I haven't been keeping up with current events, but I'm not particularly sure why sewer is out of the question for this project and why we need to do a package treatment plant. I think that it would add exorbitantly to the project cost, at least $1 million, whereas if you recall under the last RFP, we actually did get at least one developer who was willing to lay in sewer at their costs, which adds to the financials of this project, because the more users we add on to the system at no cost to the town, that's a benefit, direct benefit, not only to the town in terms of new user fees, but to the existing users because of the project costs the existing sewer rates would be affected. The third component, I think, is what I had mentioned, the management contract itself. I know in the RFP, we had sort of a boilerplate language as far as the management contract and agreement. But I've read that agreement, and there's an awful lot of room for the management company or the proposed developer. I don't want to say they can drive a truck through some of the holes in those clauses, but they can certainly devise it to their advantage. And I think we need to be very, very careful about that. This is a 99-year lease on the land, and we need provisions and clauses in that agreement that will allow the town to intercede or even revoke the agreement and take the land back in the most extraordinary circumstances. So those three areas, I think, are going to be really vital for us.
Thank you. And how long do you think the process will take?
Just to get this RFP bid and out, which will be a coordinated effort with under 30B, the Chief Procurement Officer, which is Mr. Andrews, we would need to coordinate both with the Board of Selectmen and his office 30 days, 1 month, 4 meetings. The first meeting would be organizational, establish a chairman, a clerk to take notes to comply with the open meeting laws, discuss the parliamentary procedures that we'll operate under, including the open meeting laws, discuss our agenda, our goals as provided to us by the board, and just basically get our structure in place. That's the first meeting, followed by the next 3 meetings, which would be to actually craft the RFP.
Okay, thank you. And we had mentioned about having a representative from the committee to come to the Board of Selectmen on a weekly basis to update us. You wouldn't have any problem with that, would you?
Problem? No. The reason why it's so critical that this committee and the Board of Selectmen work in tandem and frequently is because ultimately we want to get this project certified and all of these units countable as affordable units. That means a local initiative project. That's what this project would need to be, and that is the Board of Selectmen's charge. And in order to get this approved by DHCD and all of those units counted so we can build towards our 10% threshold required under DHCD, it's really important that the Board of Selectmen be very involved in each step of this project, not just to approve an ultimate bid and developer, but to be in compliance with those procedures in the DHCD process. So I think there necessarily has to be a close and frequent relationship there.
And then, and I think you answered this, and I don't know if Steve's question was, what is your experience with RFPs? I think you answered it with as far as the writing and rewriting of these ones, but if you have anything else that you wanted to add to that, from Mr. Holmes' question.
I don't know if it was Mr. Holmes' question or Mrs. Winslow's question as to what is the most relevant experience. That's Mrs. Winslow's question. Well, to answer them both, this would be my third experience with this specific RFP, which I've already answered. I guess to Mrs. Winslow's question, most relevant experience, again, this experience, this project, and I would also add that I've had experience. I was on a school building, the middle school building project on that building committee, and there were several what I would call mini RFPs within that overall project. It was a $22 million project. It was a redevelopment, but in actuality, that middle school, the majority of which is completely new construction, so I would consider it new development. And that was, of that $22 million project, we came in on time and slightly under budget. So I have had experience on both the Board of Selectmen side, liaison to CETA, sitting on the middle school building project, and also being a Serpent commissioner, and where we dealt with, constantly dealt with RFPs in the form of federal and state projects for roadways, highways, bridges, and
Thank you.
and other municipal projects.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are you all set, Mrs. Winslow?
You did answer my question, but my my specific question was: is there one project or one thing that you've accomplished that you think, if the answer is the middle school building committee, that's fine. But I just wanted to make sure that.
Again, I'm not sure that I would point to one. I would say that middle school project. I would say that this particular Westfield RFP project. I would also point to the 80 Makepeace BDOD legislation and ultimately public-private partnership agreement, which in fact this really is. And so there is a corollary there. We are engaging in a public-private partnership under this Westfield scheme, and that's and I was personally involved in the negotiations with 80 Makepeace, along with the then former town administrator as well as Mrs. Pillsbury. We were the subcommittee to the Board of Selectmen, negotiating directly with 80M, both with respect to the ultimate BDOD legislation, which happened twice. It failed originally at the State House level. And then secondly, with respect to the whole business development tax scheme, and there is a great deal of tax incentives built into this project, both from the perspective of the developer and the investors in that development.
Thank you.
Mr. Cruz? Thank you, Mr. Savageau. I think you've sufficiently supplied enough information to give the board a lot of food for thought. You seem to be a very uniquely qualified candidate for this committee in very many ways. So thank you for volunteering your time.
I might be good at something after all.
Again.
Thank you.
You're welcome. An application from Mrs. Bronk. Mrs. Bronk, we have an application for you for this committee.
Oh, I reneged mine, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're withdrawing your application? Thank you, I'm sorry, I apologize, I didn't get that word. We have Martha Strawn. Would you like to come forward, please?
Bruce is a hard act to follow.
Would you like to explain your interest in the committee, please?
Yes, at the moment I am recently elected the Council of Aging chairperson, and I've been on the committee, and I certainly supported the Westfield committee and spoke up at town meeting and feel that it is a worthy project for the town of Wareham, especially for seniors with affordable housing. And I am a recently relatively young senior citizen myself, and so I have obviously contact with seniors, and I feel I am very familiar with the needs of seniors. And as my background, I am a retired reading specialist. I was 21 years in the classroom and 12 years as a reading specialist. And I wrote numerous grants. I was on the French River Teacher Center for the town of Oxford, the board of directors, for 15 years, in which I'm very familiar with RFPs, and I've been exposed to numerous state and federal grants. And I wrote the first teacher-made state grant for the state of Massachusetts. I'm rather proud of that. It was before Proposition 2.5, and it was renewed twice, and it was for classroom management. I'm also very active in the Mass Reading Association, the International Reading Association, and the Mass Teachers Association, in which I've been involved with grants. For my local reading council, I've written numerous grants where out of 26 honor council grants, I wrote 17 of them, and they've all been approved. And again, I continue being involved in these organizations, and when I take on something new, I do put something aside. So I do stay relatively active as a senior, and I'm hoping that when you do make your selection, that there will be a relatively young senior on your committee that is familiar with the needs of the seniors.
Thank you. Mrs. Ekstrom?
Thank you. Have you had a chance to look at the RFP?
Yes, I have.
Okay, and what do you think the most important component of the RFP is?
I think the most important is the affordable housing. So I am, as I say, on a fixed income. I know how it is to be on a fixed income, and you have many seniors that may be by themselves. They're either widowed or they're single, and they're on a fixed income. And with the economy the way it is, it's really a very difficult situation, and there's a great need for helping in that area.
Thank you. And how long do you think this process will take until we get the RFP out?
I think many of the candidates have mentioned 4 weeks, and I could live with 4 weeks. I think that's reasonable.
Okay. And the board had we've spoken about having a representative come in from the review committee to appear in front of the board on a weekly basis. So do you have any problems with that? Do you think?
I think it's an excellent suggestion, so there is communication ongoing.
Okay. And then finally, Mr. Holmes' question or reasonable facsimile thereof. What is your experience with the RFP process? Well,
I have been involved with the RFP process, and I have been involved with some of the grants I've mentioned to you. I've also been involved with the a SPED grant that designed a playground for the school, and was very much involved where we involved a telephone company to bring in telephone poles to put tires up the side, both sides, and we designed a playground.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mrs. Winslow?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As you've heard, my question is, what's your one accomplishment, project that you've been involved in, something that you've personally contributed to that you think makes you the best candidate to sit on the committee?
I think the fact that I am a relatively recently, I retired early, senior citizen, and I feel that I've made a point of becoming very familiar with their needs, and before I became an officer of the Council of Aging, I have ridden the buses with them. I eat lunch with them on a daily basis as often as I can. I think I am very familiar with their needs. I grew up in a neighborhood where I had surrogate grandparents that lived next to me. I was very familiar with elderly people. I think that's a benefit if you have been exposed to elderly people early on as well. And so I think I would bring a lot to the table.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. I think you've answered all the questions that are pertinent. We appreciate you putting your name in. And
Thank you.
be safe going home. The next candidate we have this evening is Mr. William Heaney. Good evening, Bill.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming in. If you could explain your interest in the project and
Sure.
what your unique expertise might be.
Sure. My name is Bill Heaney, and as some of you may have known, I spent a large part of my career at UMass Dartmouth, and during my time at UMass Dartmouth, I was involved in and responsible for about $150 million worth of new construction. That new construction went the entire gamut from residence housing to office buildings to high security laboratories, and it even included athletic fields. And with that experience and background, I believe that I'm qualified to serve on this committee and actually help in the development of the RFP. This, excuse me, this project for the town of Wareham is essentially a design-build contract, and in one of those kinds of contracts, what typically happens, there are some good points to it and some bad points to it. The typical good points are that you set your expectation and you have one party to deal with, and that's the developer. The developer brings the architect, the developer brings the engineers and so forth, and completes the project for you. In this project, it's essentially the same as that. The downside of a design-build project is that you have to be exceptionally specific in the front end, because you don't get a second bite at the apple. And if this were a design-build project that the town was going to own, the RFP would be this thick. Every nut, bolt, piece of plywood, shingle on the roof, insulation, everything would be specified. I believe that this project doesn't reach that level, but it does reach the level of specificity. And I have read the RFP. I will say that I did it today. And in a quick review of the RFP, I noticed several areas where it lacked specificity. And you know, the one that jumped off the page at me is the number of units, or the way the units were described. And the units are described as 150 to 200 units, and some will have 1 bedroom and some will have 2 bedroom. It doesn't say how big they are. And so you technically you leave that decision up to the contractor, or the developer rather, and you may end up with something a lot smaller than you had envisioned if you don't sit back and take the time and actually lay out, at least in your mind, how large these units should be. So I think with my experience in both project development as well as finance, I believe I'm uniquely qualified to serve on this committee.
Thank you, Bill. You don't mind if I call you Bill, do you?
That's fine, Jane.
Good. Well, we've known each other for a while, so. Mrs. Ekstrom.
Thank you. Okay, you had a chance to look at the RFP. What do you think the most important component is of the RFP, Mr. Heaney?
I don't think there is one most important. I think there's actually two. And the two that I think of is defining the project and what our intention is in the project. I think that's huge. And the other is in the whole area of defining the specificity of what we want in the project and design objectives section.
Great, thank you. And how long do you think this process will take?
The RFP process?
Yeah, from now until we put out the RFP.
I've heard 30 days, and it could take 30 days. That's acceptable. Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And as we've talked about, the Board of Selectmen, we were suggesting having a member of the committee come in on a weekly basis. Do you see any problem with that, or
None.
think that? Okay.
None whatsoever.
And then, thank you. And then Steve's question, I guess probably your experience at the college, but your experience with the RFP process? I know
each one of the projects that got developed had an RFP, and there's a half a dozen of them out there.
Great, thank you very much.
Mrs. Winslow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Heaney, what's the one project, accomplishment, something that you've been involved in that you feel makes you the best candidate to sit on the committee?
When I think back over the projects that I've done and been involved in, what comes to mind that answers that question is what's called the Woodlands Commons at UMass Dartmouth. It is a 6-building design build project that was developed in some would say record time to meet the needs of students coming in under budget and ahead of schedule, and so that's my answer.
Thank you.
Mr. Cruz? I think maybe you're a unique in a unique position to answer this question. I haven't asked it to the other candidates, but do you really believe that this project might be a source of revenue for the town, Bill?
The project could be a source of revenue for the town. You have to get into the details to see that. But as I understand it, it's a taxable project, and depending upon how it gets developed and the occupancy and so forth, it could be, absolutely. Whether it's a money maker or not for the town, I think it's absolutely necessary. For all the reasons that others have said about senior housing and 40B and all of that. I don't think it's going to be a drain on town resources at all. But if it makes a dollar, that's a bonus in my mind.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions.
Okay.
Thanks again for coming forward as an applicant.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe that wraps up the candidates who were supposed to be here this evening. We had a couple who were left over from last week. I don't know if any of them are here tonight or if they've been possibly rescheduled for next week. But just in case you came tonight, is anybody else here who was supposed to be heard last week?
I don't see anyone.
I don't see anybody. Thank you. Is there a representative from the Board of Health here this evening?
I didn't see anyone.
Okay, we will ask the representative from the Board of Health to come next week. I'm not sure if they had called into the office and were unable to come. Sorry?
Madam Chair,
Just for the board's edification. Yes, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Andrews.
I will help make that arrangement for next week.
Just for the board's edification, it had come to the attention of our appointment liaison, Mr. Holmes, that there was an issue with the process, the Board of Health appointment process. There was a vacancy on the Board of Health, and apparently they for some reason thought that it was within their purview to reorganize within their own board and appoint and/or promote an associate member to a full member. And the reason that we were going to have this discussion tonight was to try to straighten that situation out and make sure that the existing Board of Health members and chair understood the appointment process. Full members to the Board of Health must be appointed according to the Charter, Section 3-2C, by the Board of Selectmen. So we just wanted to have that. We have a candidate who was put in for the Board of Health, and the appointment would be held next week. So we were hoping to make sure that we had this issue straightened out this week prior to that happening, in the event that the Board of Health would like to make a recommendation as to who they would like their full-time applicant to be, in light of the fact that they may have already invited the associate member to step up to a full membership. So that is why that was on the agenda this evening. Does anybody have any questions regarding that? No? Good. Thank you. Right, we have no licenses and permits. We'll have the...
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just since we do have an interview scheduled next week, will we do the Board of Health first and then
Yes, the Board of
interview
Health
the-
first, and then we'll interview the candidate, and hopefully everything will come out in the wash together.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Andrews, Town Administrator report, please.
Madam Chair, again, good evening, and thank you. On the leadership team update, we have had and are in receipt of a January 11th report from the state auditor, Joseph Danucci. That basically puts into place a ton of research and work that has been done on municipal dams, over 100 studies throughout the state, of which we are listed in this report. And I was going to ask Mr. Gifford if he's still here to come forward. Okay. And to help with this matter, it's relative to key statutory requirements for safety, for including emergency action planning, inspections, maintenance, and some remediation of the substandard conditions of dams across the state that are under the jurisdiction of municipalities. And I see Mr. Gifford is, thank you. and Mr. Judici is here as well. The part of the letter, the introductory letter that I just want to focus on from State Auditor Danucci that he had framed was that for longer-term planning, the Commonwealth should establish, I'll paraphrase from his letter, a multi-year program for incentive financing, similar to what we do for schools under the Massachusetts School Building Authority, that to help cities and towns mitigate some of the problems with dams. And with that being said, it's a fairly lengthy report. It has been, once again, forwarded to the town and for the board's review. And maybe Mr. Gifford could bring us up to speed on the status of where we are and how we're going to be moving forward.
I'd be glad to.
Thank you.
First of all, a little bit of history as far as both dams we have. The Parker Mills Dam, which is where Tremont Nail is, and the Tremont Dam, which is in West Wareham. Back in '07, when there was a lot of flooding going on, and I'm sure you'll remember it in the Taunton area, that they had a dam up there that was close to being breached, and it was all over the news. We decided that we would get a hold of Power Engineering and have them do some inspections of our two dams, so we'd know where we were. And the other point of having those inspections done was so, at least in my mind, I thought there'd be federal monies or state monies coming down to repair some of these dams. So we would be ahead of the curve, have the report on the governor's desk. Unfortunately, that never materialized, but there were no monies that came down. But since then, we still are ahead of the curve. The Parker Mills Dam, which is a high hazard dam, is due for another inspection in 2012, January of 2012. We have to inspect it every 2 years. So we're on target with that. There are some preliminary inspections that have to be done every 6 months. One was supposed to be done in January. It hasn't been because of the weather, so we've asked for extension, and we've asked for extension until April of this year. With all that said, in the report from Mr. Danucci's office, repairs to that dam are between $2 and $2.5 million. Power Engineers report, the last report in 2010, the repairs are between $1,160,000 to $2 million. So there's a little discrepancy there, but there are probably a number of factors that go along with that. Mr. Andrews, and I'm not sure if he's aware of the fact, we have a meeting on the 16th of next week with AD Makepeace, Cranberry Growers Association, Dougie Beaton, because I feel that they have some responsibilities here also. The fish ladder, the spillway, that's all on Makepeace property. They control the level of the water, they control the planks. There is a lot of benefit to the cranberry growers as far as this dam goes. So they should share some of the responsibilities with us, and we will be meeting with them on Wednesday. And then that Friday, the 18th, we'll be meeting with Power Engineering to discuss this plan and where we go forward also. Any questions? Brenda, step one.
Mr. Gifford, is this on the capital plan anywhere? This dam project? How are we intending to finance this project?
Actually, it was submitted to the Capital Plan Committee last week? A couple weeks ago.
Just a couple weeks ago, okay,
Yeah.
because I don't remember seeing it on the capital plan.
Yeah.
Obviously needs to be there. And we had talked, I think, at one point about some grants, some possibility of some grants.
Right, and those haven't materialized.
They haven't materialized with,
Well, we haven't seen any grants come down yet.
did we submit application
There
for
isn't.
grants?
The applications haven't,
There
I
hasn't
haven't-
been any.
I haven't seen any applications for a grant. I mean, if they're available, we most certainly would apply for them.
Can we double check and confirm that there aren't any grants that we could apply for? And if there are some grants that we could apply for, we can get that in the works? I do think that it is incumbent upon our private parties who are responsible for, and actually have some ownership, don't they actually control, they do control the locks, right? The
That's
cranberry
correct.
growers?
That's correct.
That, and then I think we've had this discussion before, not too long ago, if I recall, in the recent past, maybe.
Well, because
Last
we
2
had a
years
meeting
ago?
at one point on the site, and I remember Brenda was there, and Jeff LaFleur, and some representatives from Makepeace.
And Jimmy Potter, yeah.
Yeah.
So it was a
And
few
we-
years ago.
You know, and in that report, is there any further discussion of restriction of traffic on that bridge?
No.
So we're still okay
Yeah.
with just
We're
keeping the
still okay
trucks and
there.
buses off?
In fact, the report in April, I feel confident it'll say that there hasn't been any changes as of yet. I mean, I keep a visual on it and look at it on a weekly basis.
And I think, if I may, Madam Chair, Mr. Gifford could confirm this. When we first got the initial PAR report, and it said that it was a high-risk dam, that was when we were all like, oh my goodness, it's a high-risk dam, and we have to
correct.
close the street and everything. And then come to find out, high-risk just meant that if the dam, it didn't matter what shape it was in, if it was a high-risk dam, that was determined by what was downstream from it. So if the dam ever did go, would there be a loss of property, life, or anything like that? So once I think Park came in and explained that it wasn't in fact risky, it was just the level of it. So, and I think that it was after that when they had told us that the road was okay. So, but I do agree, if I may go back to the part about other people having ownership, and it's been a couple years, so I don't remember, but I know there is a Mass General law that deals specifically with dams, with cranberry bogs, and with the authority. It's either 139, 258. I have it at home. I know I do. And it actually specifically talks to exactly what you were talking about as far as if they have control over it, if that, you know, if they have access to the land or all of that stuff, that there is some responsibility on their end for that. So if we could find that out before we meet with them on the 16th, so that we have an idea, or maybe talk to council and get, you know, what our rights are to hold them accountable to their share. So, because my understanding is that I thought years ago, 10, 12 years ago, I had heard that there was actually some type of payment to the town. The rumor has, I don't know how true it is, the rumor has it that the then town administrator got in an argument with the cranberry grower, and he stopped paying, and they never pursued it because he left there. I don't know how true that is, but that would have to be probably 12, 15 years ago. So, I mean,
Mark's
there
too
may be
old to remember
something.
back that far.
I think I was in high school.
I'm
actually,
only
when
kidding, Mark. Sorry.
Actually, I do remember
But you
the
do
argument.
remember
It was
something
when
like
Mr.
that.
Murphy was here.
Thank you. All right. I didn't want to say any names because I
No.
wasn't positive, but I thought it was Joe.
The other question, you know, that's eventually going to have to be answered is, what are we going to do with that complex? Because the northern foundation of that building is part of the dam.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to have to make some sort of decision as, what are we going to do there?
Right.
So,
We know.
Yeah.
But thank you for reminding us. Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Gifford? You're all set, Mr. Cruz. Ms. Winslow? Thank you. Did you have anything else you wanted to say about the Tremont Dam?
Just quickly, the Tremont Dam is a little different classification. It's got to be inspected every 5 years. And that's due, that's coming up shortly. We have repaired one gate, so we've got one gate that's got full mobility up and down. The second one has been lowered to its lowest point. So I feel pretty confident that we won't be going through what we went through last year if we get high volumes of rain.
Right.
We will be able to discharge a
God
heck
bless.
of a lot more water through
God
that
bless.
spillway. But that dam also does need some repairs.
The last question I have regarding the dams in general is we did have a presentation about some dam mitigation, if you will. They were talking about getting rid of some dams and making some adjustments upstream that would, you know, store the
correct.
water, and have you been involved in any kind of regional meetings that have to
I
do
haven't
with
been
that?
involved in any regional meetings, but I am aware of that. That is what I call my option B. If we don't come up with funding at a reasonable time, we should maybe look at those options. But I think at this point, we don't have to.
Madam Chair, may I ask one question about the Tremont Dam?
Yes, you may.
Did we ever get back a hold of the group that was interested in the hydroelectric?
French River connection out of New York. Mr. Andrews and I spoke to them roughly a year ago.
Yeah, about 8 months ago, I believe.
Yeah, and they went away, seemed pretty satisfied. They wanted to come back and do an inspection of the dam. It didn't materialize. I will try contacting them again, but for some reason, they just, they seemed pretty excited about it and never returned.
Well, maybe something else got them more excited, and now they'll be excited again.
Yeah.
Be nice if you could just try to track it down one more time.
Okay.
Anything else for Mr. Gifford?
No, thank you, Mr. Gifford.
If I could ask the indulgence of the board and the town administrator, I'd like to jump right down to the Wareham Police Department Certification Award. Chief Stanley and Officer Philman have been waiting here patiently, and it's a pleasant duty to break up the meeting here for a few minutes to move on to a pleasant subject.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to quickly brief the board on where we've been and where we're going. The accreditation is a self-initiated evaluation process by which police departments strive to meet and maintain standards that have been established for the profession, by the profession. We surely have done that. When you look at where we are and where we've been in the course of the last 12 months or so, 14 months, we have gone from a department that really did not have any viable standards. And I remember the first time I sat before the board, I told you that we would in fact update our policies and procedures and live by them and hold ourselves accountable. We jumped in with both feet to the accreditation process. I know that Selectman Cruz and Mr. Andrews were with us in Hopkinton at an award ceremony, and we are now one of, how many, Bill? 38?
There's
40?
200 police agencies in Massachusetts, and where we represent the departments that are accredited and certified represent only 25% of those 200 departments. So we're in a pretty elite group. There's 18 departments certified and approximately 30 that are accredited, which is our next step, and we're moving forward towards that.
And I would really love it if you could take a minute and hold up that beautiful, oh, they brought the camera.
Well, I just asked them if they could just do a camera angle on it for a moment while it was there. So.
I think the important thing to realize is that this was really a town-wide effort. You people, the Board of Selectmen, were instrumental in setting the tone on this also. I remember about the policies and procedures and how frustrated were you wouldn't have them. I think, Brenda, you really forced that issue with me the first time I met you. In addition to that, you were, as a board, very cooperative in working with us, because as these policies and procedures are developed, you have to approve them ultimately.
We had to read them all.
You did, and believe me, there's another stack waiting towards accreditation. And also, I can't thank enough Mr. Andrews. Mark was extremely helpful and supportive and constantly told me, tell me what you need, Rick, to make this happen. I make myself available, any other staff in any of the departments, whatever you need. This is a very important milestone for the Wareham Police Department. I thank you, Mr. Andrews, as well.
Thank you.
The men and women of the Wareham Police Department, not one, and believe me, some cities and towns run into major union problems. The situation with the Wareham Police Department, both when it started, when George Dion was in charge of the union, and under the leadership and direction of Steve Kearney as the newer union president, they have been tremendous. The superior officers, all the way down to civilian staff, dispatcher unions, everyone has been incredible, have been supportive, have taken ownership in this, and have really taken pride in it. But there's one person who really deserves a tremendous amount of credit, and that's Bill Philman. When Bill Philman offered to take on this task, I wasn't aware, but in his years in the military, Bill was instrumental in working on projects just like this, on standards and so forth, and standard development. So it was a natural for Bill. And I happen to sit on the Massachusetts Accreditation Board, and I know the frustration of many departments. And I know the frustration of back in North Andover also, some of the things that I went through getting accredited. And it was a learning process. But Bill Philman was able to navigate through the accreditation process with expertise, with the wherewithal to know how to get around problems and to deal with them, and to make it work in a facility such as the current Wareham Police Department building itself, which is extremely difficult to work in. Bill was able to make all that happen, and Bill, my hat's off to you and public congratulations.
Thank you, Chief. I think the chief broke into my office this afternoon and stole all my talking points. But again, this was by no means a one-man show. This included the help of a lot of people, including the board, Town Administrator Andrews, all the men and women on the department, the union, which represents 98% of our officers, who are the backbone of our department. As the chief said, we had a lot of buy-in. This is one of the problems why a lot of departments are not successful in getting this elite status, because they don't have buy-in from everybody. But I can honestly say that this plaque belongs to not just me, it belongs to the whole town and the Wareham Police Department. Just before Chief Stanley came on board, we were referred to as a ship without a rudder. And Chief Stanley, after I got to know him, as he said, I've had a lot of years in the military. I worked for the Defense Logistics Agency for many years. And I've worked with a lot of CEOs of the Raytheons, the Lockheed Martins, admirals, generals, and I have to tell you, this guy has got some incredible management skills. And he's right on par with all of them. He can identify a problem, he sets a strategy, and he comes up with a corrective action. He gets things done. He doesn't deal in mediocrity. He goes right for the problem, and again he fixes it. And I can't say enough about how he's treated me. He gave me an office, gave me a new computer, and said, "Here, go to work." And I was on patrol for my entire career with the Wareham Police Department, and it's all I wanted to do. I never took a test for sergeant or anything, because I've been there, done that. And he called me in his office and he said, "Bill, I'd like you to be your accreditation manager." And I said, he said, "I don't know, Chief." I said, "I really like being on patrol and dealing with the public out there." And I looked out the window. It was December. It was raining. It was snowing. It was about 30 degrees. And I says, "You know what, Chief? I'm in."
Take this job.
So, thank you very much, everybody. This is an award for everybody.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. I'd just like to say, on behalf of the Board of Selectmen and the entire town, thank you both. I think this accomplishment stands on its own as a true symbol of the round turn, if I could use that phrase to some military folks, that the town has taken, and in more than one area, but in this area in particular. And appreciate your leadership, Chief, your temerity and hard work in getting this together. I mean, I remember sitting here being presented with a 1988 version of another town's policies and procedures and feeling very disappointed and unhappy about it. And I just think that it's a breath of fresh air, and thank you for the good job that you and all your men and women are doing every day on behalf of the town.
Thank you, and we'll see. And we'll see you in May for the accreditation.
Great, great.
Yes. Looking forward to it. Thank you. Mr. Andrews, do you think we could indulge
Of course.
one more skip on the agenda? I'd like to skip to Mr. Judici so he doesn't have to stay and ride home late. I know he was relieved when we didn't have to have him last week.
I appreciated that.
Drive down in the storm, but
We did get you a set of snowshoes, didn't we?
thank you. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Mike Judici from CDM. Just going to give a quick update on the status of the two construction projects that are ongoing, contract 1 and 2, and then I understand we want to have a little discussion about contract 3 as well, and what the status and direction is on that contract. In terms of contract 1, project is essentially completed. At this point, we're down to just punch list items, which are those minor items that need to get resolved by the contractor before its contract is 100% complete. The majority of those items involve restoration of front yards and properties, and the likelihood, the majority of that will be finished in the spring. It's not the type of work you could perform at this time of year. There are a few other items that they're working on to get that list taken care of. But the majority of it will be done over the next several months in the spring once the weather breaks. In terms of contract 2, Oakdale and Cromeset, at this point all of the sewer is installed in the streets with the exception of the run in Mattapoisett Road. As you know, we've moved the pumping station for that area onto Mattapoisett. That pumping station will actually be located below grade in the street. We're in the process of finalizing the shop drawings for that pumping station. Once that's completed, they'll start construction on that sewer and install that pumping station. There's also an easement that needs to be finalized and recorded for the electrical pedestal and generator associated with that pumping station, in addition to the easement that's required for the Cromeset Road pumping station. That's in process as well. So both of those easements are expected to be moved along within the next month or so, and the contractor can schedule the work for those two pumping stations. The surge tank that we talked about before that was installed at the Narrows pumping station has been completed. At this point, we're waiting for startup and testing from the manufacturer of the tank. It was initially scheduled for this week, and they canceled that, and we're hoping to get them out in the next week or so to get the final testing and startup and training done on that system.
Can I stop
Absolutely.
you for one quick second? I think Mr. Campina, with the surge tank being completed, would like permission from the board to send out letters letting people know that they can tie in on contract 1. I believe we do need permission from the board to do that.
I'd like to ask that permission to get the letters out.
Mrs. Winslow.
Did you say contract 1?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, when the letters go out, just for clarification, from the date of the letter until they have 1 year to hook in, is that that's
Correct, they have up to 1 year.
So if you send the letters out in February, then they have till February of next year to hook in.
Yes.
How practical is it for anybody to start hooking in right now?
Well, for me, I don't know, but I have requests. I have one gentleman in particular that needs to close on property and actually tie in. He's buying a piece of property in Parkwood, and the bank won't close. So he's asked for a letter. He's asked to tie in. And I said I couldn't give him that permission, that would have to come from the board. I have others that are asking for permission to tie in. So there's a few people out there. I mean, to each his own. So I figured if we get the letters out, those that want to tie in now have that option, and the rest have the rest of the year, the summer, spring, and fall. And so I thought I could make everybody, address everybody's issues.
Right, I understand. Thank you. Mrs. Ekstrom?
I would say, so if someone ties in today, they will have sewer facilities tomorrow morning.
Correct. The surge tank,
I mean,
the
it's
surge
already
tank
to
is
go.
done, yes. I asked CDM implicitly, if someone was to tie in today, flush the toilet tomorrow morning, we are able to operate, absolutely. We can move that product along, transport it, and bring it to the treatment plant and treat it, absolutely.
Okay, in order for them to tie in, what's the process for the destruction of their current system? Isn't there some requirement that they also have to?
Absolutely. That's part of the package.
Right.
Along with the trench permit, the actual installation, removing the cap, their procedure. They actually have to, part of the contract, bidding it with the homeowner, is acknowledge and give them a plan to destroy, to abandon, properly abandon by DEP rules, that septic system. And they can fill it with sand. The goal is to, or crush it. They can take it out, and if someone wants to use a tank, I guess. But the idea is to eliminate any type of a void in the future. It's a hazard. So that is part of the process, and when the final inspection's done, it won't be authorized until that is actually done. So that's part of the project that goes along with the installation and hooking up, and they won't be allowed to do anything until they actually abandon that system. You're actually correct.
Does anyone have any other questions for Mr. Campina regarding the letters? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to send out, to allow, direct, what would be the proper motion? Authorize Mr. Campina to send out the tie-in letters to contract 1, which is Linwood, Ladd Aves, Tempest Knob, and Parkwood Beach.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstain? It's unanimous.
Thank you.
You may proceed with your letters.
Anything else on 1 or 2, guys? Or
I'm sorry?
anything else on contract 1 or 2 you want to talk about?
No, everything is pretty straightforward now.
Okay. Moving on to contract 3, we've had some discussions over the last number of months about how to proceed with contract 3. As I had mentioned previously, in terms of a schedule, the overriding issue right now is, as you know, contract 3 is part of the same SRF loan package as contracts 1 and 2. They were all bundled together when we originally laid out the program and submitted as essentially one project. And each of those that one larger project was broken up into 3 separate construction contracts. The clock on that SRF loan has been ticking for some time. We applied back in 2007, I believe, at this point. So we've been on the list for a number of years. So the directive we've been given from DEP was that because they don't want that loan to extend out further than it already has for those projects, that contract 3 would need to essentially be underway by the end of this fiscal year, by the June 30th of 2011. And I've gotten further direction from them in terms of what that exactly means. And I was told, or we were told, that as long as a contract was awarded before the end of June, then that would fall within their directive to meet their schedule. So at this point, we do need direction in terms of whether we want to bid contract 3 now in order to get done what needs to get done by that June 30th deadline. There was some discussion earlier in the year when we started talking and looking at betterments for contracts 1 and 2 and 3 and initially. And certainly the estimates that were given for contract 3 at the time were a lot higher than contracts 1 and 2. So at least from where I stand, a fundamental question is, for me, does the town want to proceed with the contract given what the estimated betterments indicate there would be for that contract? If the answer is yes, then we would proceed to try to meet that schedule. If not, then some of the other issues that need to be addressed for this contract sort of fall by the wayside, if you will.
Sorry, Mike, I'm not sure I quite understand the question. I didn't think there was a choice about whether or not this section of town had to be sewered. I thought it was under the DEP agreement.
Well, it is. One of the other issues that is on the table is, as you know, this board, or former compilation of this board, decided several years ago to expedite the process of sewering these areas that are in the CWMP. And there was a good reason to do that, and it was taking advantage of economies of scale and getting as much sewer in as possible during a time that construction costs were low, and got a lot of sewer in the ground for a reasonable price. The original schedule that was laid out in the CWMP had a much longer time frame in which all these areas would be sewered. In fact, the original implementation schedule went out to the year 2024 to have all those areas tied in as part of that program. So in terms of overall schedule, the town is ahead of where it was originally laid out in that CWMP. In terms of this deadline for this current SRF loan, if that isn't met, then it's just a process of resubmitting the remaining areas as a separate project at some point in the future, if that's what the town decides to do. So the window of opportunity to keep it part of this loan is closing. However, the overall schedule that was laid out for implementation of this program in the CWMP is still, you're still on schedule, actually ahead of schedule that was originally laid out. So the short answer to your question is yes, these areas are supposed to be sewered, need to be sewered as part of that agreement with DEP. But you're ahead of schedule in meeting that goal, if that makes sense.
Does anyone, Mr. Cruz?
Yes, Mr. Judici, on the contract, you said it's ready to go. Are we ready to put it out for bid? I think a month ago we asked for the pump stations to be not only located, but for them to be released from the owners so we'll have no problems like we had on the other 2 contracts. Has that been established yet?
No, that was one of a series of issues that needed to be resolved. I know Mr. Campina has been working in that regard. Those are, and I don't know if, Guy, you want to speak to the status of those, but the short answer is I don't believe that issue has been resolved.
Right, because a month ago at the last meeting that I attended to, we had given the okay for them to see about releasing whatever has to be done for the pumping stations.
Mm-hmm.
And that needs to be done before the contracts go out so we won't have the same problems we had before.
Absolutely.
So
I
is that ready to go out now? You're saying it has to be by June, so why aren't we working on it to make sure that it is done?
We are working on it.
There's two, if I may, Madam Chair.
Yes,
there's
please,
two issues right now, and that's the location of the pump stations. The decisions we have to make, if we're going to move forward, the decision we have to make, and make it as soon as possible, is A, are we going to site it where we're told to by CDM, where they suggested, which would involve taking of property. We've talked to all the owners of the property, and no one's willingly going to give us easements. They understand the process, and they understand the compensation. However, they're not willingly, without adverse, giving us the easements. Yeah. So that's one. Number 2 is we have our own property. So that's available to us. That's an extra $250,000 minimum because there's some unknowns. It's depth. We're down 20 feet. tremendous amount of groundwater to move, so the best estimate that we're getting from CDM is approximately $250,000. And that's their best estimate, but they don't know what's down. They can only assume by some of the bores they've done. But if we run into more, then again, that inflates the cost. We're talking $35,000 betterments, give or take, and now we're going to add to that by moving to our property. So that's a concern. So the board would have to make a decision, how do we want to proceed? If we are going to proceed with contract 3, then the decision has to be is, are we taking the property and siting there as far as the pump stations go, or are we going to put our own property? And that decision is yours and yours alone.
If I may, Madam Chair, last week we had a gentleman come in front of us for citizens' participation, and he had requested the opportunity to have a meeting to discuss where they were going to put it, and I think where they were going to put the pump stations. And, you know, and we've had this problem before that they weren't asked, and as Mr. Cruz said, that it was after the fact that people said, oh, no, don't change, you know, and we had to make adjustments. That I think that while I understand the deadline, that I think that it may be prudent for us, especially, as you said, Mr. Campina, that, you know, look, at if they're going to pay a betterment and someone says, no, I don't want it on my side yard, but 100 other people find out that that's going to cause them an increase of $10,000 because he doesn't want it in his side yard. You know, there may be a majority, I don't want to say majority rule, but that type of thing where there may be a discussion because, yes, you are absolutely right. The Board of Selectmen, it is, or the Sewer Commission, it is up to them to decide that. But if once they see that, so I would think that it may be in everyone's best interest if we could make an arrangement to have an informal meeting as far as these are the areas or whatever that we could come up with to explain this to all of the residents there. You know, because this isn't going to be, you know, it's the last project. It's probably the more complicated of the projects. So, I mean, I'd like to at least give the people as much information as we could at the beginning of it. I also, there's no good time to do this. And I think that one of the reasons why the board previously wanted to be proactive was, number one, because of the pollution, that we wanted to try to do as much as we could, but it was also, as Mr. Giudice said, timing-wise, everyone knows that today's dollar is only worth about 80% of, you know, a dollar 2 years from now or 4 years from now. And so I don't see us, if we start this now, you know, the economy's starting to turn, it's starting to get a little better out there. By the time these are going out and being billed, you know, if we're going on the same track, I think it would be in our best interest to do it now, because if we say, you know what, we have 8 years to do it, we'll worry about it then. We've got a couple of issues that are going on. Number one, anyone's septic systems that fail during that time, they've got to replace them, or else the house is uninhabitable. So they'd be replacing a system, $10,000, $20,000 for an upgrade there in 5 years when we're going to go in, or 8 years we're going to go in and put sewer. Now they're stuck paying the betterment on top of that. So I think that to get that done, and also, you know, I know that number's banted around $35,000. We don't know exactly what it's going to be, but if it's $35,000 now, I'm guessing it's going to be $50,000. And right now, if you look at Falmouth and Nantucket, they're looking at between $50,000 and $100,000 betterments. That's what they're discussing right now, because they don't have the plant, they don't already have the systems in place. They're looking at 2 or 3 years down the road. And so my opinion is that we bite the bullet and do it now. But I do really think that we should come up with something to at least allow these residents to have an opportunity to see where the different places are and what, and I understand it can't be an exact cost, but if you say to them, you know, it's $250,000 more, $250,000 to $350,000 more, which is going to mean, you know, approximately $10,000 more in a betterment or whatever it is, just to give them a better idea. And then finally, one last thing, if I can ask Mr. Gifford, the gentleman last week also brought up, and this was a while ago, that didn't we do some stormwater remediation down there, down in Agawam? like, no, we didn't?
Yes, we did. I'm
Okay,
sorry.
like 5 or 6 years ago or something?
Yeah.
And that they didn't do the paving because they were waiting for this to
For the
come through.
sewage, that is correct.
Do we still have money, like, in that stormwater remediation somewhere that we have it in reserve? Because that was one of his concerns, was that the paving wasn't upgraded back then because they said, well, we're gonna be putting the sewer in. And so that, he just wanted to make sure that if there was stormwater remediation money that was gonna be paying to redo that they weren't gonna get billed a second time or whatever, so.
Yeah,
you know,
the stormwater mediation, that was put in with Chapter 90 monies. So if we repave it, we didn't want to pave it at the time because it's sort of foolish to pave it and dig it up 3 or 4 years down the road.
okay, I would say he just had some concerns with that, so that might be even something that if the board is so inclined to have some type of a meeting, that you can be prepared, because I'm sure someone will be there to ask you that, so.
Right, in other words, if I understand correctly, that money was put in with the Chapter 90 monies,
Well, the stormwater mediation was paid for through Chapter 90s.
was paid for through
Right.
Chapter 90. So we would
It
have,
wasn't a
we
grant.
would, the money that was set aside
We-
for
we could-
that
we could
paving
utilize
area,
Chapter
we
90
could
monies to
utilize
pay
some
that
Chapter
one
90
for
monies, and that
for
would
certain.
possibly help pay
For a
down
couple of those areas,
a little
right?
bit of
Yeah.
the betterment.
So the same as we've done. for,
Right, as what we
for
did in
Oakdale.
Oakdale, exactly.
That's not a problem.
If I may, Madam Chair, I'm sorry.
Mr. Cruz?
Yeah, to Mr. Campina, on the two scenarios that you had given us earlier, how soon can you come back with figures? You're saying you need permission from the board, but how soon can we have it? Because it's been a while, and if you can have this meeting with the homeowners, like Mrs. Ekstrom said, they may agree to give up some of that land because it's gonna cost them X amount of money extra. So the sooner we come back with it, the sooner we can get it, so sooner we can put it out for bid.
I agree, and we could probably do that within a couple of weeks. I think the critical part is going to be on Mr. Judici, because there's some dates. I believe they need another month to finish design. So we're looking at June 11th, so I think we could ask him to back it up, and we know how far we have. But within the next couple of weeks, by all means, we should talk to the residents. But I think if we go beyond that, we might put the pressure on him as far as meeting the June, to get out the bid, because there's a state review process, and I don't, in my experience, the state isn't quick turnaround, so there's a time that we can't speak of. So I would ask him what he needs for time, and within a couple weeks, we'll get a meeting, letters out, reverse
19th.
911, whatever. 19th sounds good. Well, I'll work to the 19th.
February.
And I'll get the town hall, and we'll move forward. We'll get out letters as quick as we can. I don't know if the school department or the police department can help us as far as getting reverse 911 to those areas.
Okay.
We'll do everything we can.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Judici, would the 19th work with you?
We just need direction as soon as possible. You know, a lot will depend, obviously, where the stations end up. We've designed them to go at a certain location. If the decision is made that that's where they're going to go, obviously that expedites the process. If they have to be moved to another location, then we need time to do that redesign.
Thank you.
So that's.
And I'm sorry, and thank you. And Madam Chair, could we not only schedule that meeting, but then possibly after the meeting on an agenda have that the board would be able to meet and discuss, make a decision on it or whatever at that point, so that we would let them know, so that it's not another week or two after?
We could post our meeting for the 19th. I was going to try not to have a meeting the week of the 22nd because it's school vacation, but,
My kids like coming to the meetings.
but we could post
Not right now.
a selectmen's meeting for the 19th and make our decision right there and then if people are available on the 19th. Mrs.
not.
Winslow.
What time are you on the 19th?
We usually have had the meetings at around 10 o'clock in the morning, but it really doesn't matter, whatever.
Well, if you're having a meeting after, then the earlier we have that discussion, then you can have time to do your meeting without pushing your complete Saturday. So 10 o'clock sounds reasonable to me, and everybody gets there a couple hours, and then you can schedule a meeting. That's my guess. But I'm going to schedule for 10 o'clock, and then if that's okay with you, 10 o'clock, and as far as the beginning of the meeting. But it's not my call.
Is there a scheduling conflict
Yeah, right now I'm not available, but I'll see what I can.
on the 19th at all?
Yeah, but that's all right. It's not. I'll work on it. No, go ahead without me. If I can't make changes, then just, I don't want us to have to meet on the 22nd. I know we were trying to, and the rest of everybody else would be here, so.
Okay, well, let's try for the 19th then, and get the residents notified. Mr. Andrews will sure be happy to help in that
I
if
will
you need help
coordinate.
with that. Our staff. And then we'll try to get it rolling because I think that probably the SRF eligibility probably have just as good, if not better, a shot at it this go-round since we're already in.
Correct. Certainly, path of least resistance. You're in the system right now. It'd be a whole reapplication process to get on the list in a future year.
Which costs more money too. So try to keep the cost down. Does anybody else have any questions for Mr. Judici? Mr. Campini?
Madam Chair, other than the board, residents, would you like CDM rep? Should we have anybody else there for questions that may or may not come up? Anybody recommend? Mr. Gifford can take care of it.
That's a given.
Anybody else you can think of that I need to notify that should be there?
No, that's usually who we have. We usually have Mr. Judici, Mr. Gifford,
Okay.
yourself, members of the board who can make it. Mr. Andrews, if he can make it. Mrs. Winslow?
I just have one question, in terms of the betterments, and I understand, using Chapter 90 funds to cover the paving. There isn't any more stimulus money out there, but is there money anywhere to help offset these betterments? $35,000 it's an awful lot of money.
Not that I'm aware of at this point, unfortunately.
Well, and one other thing I was going to say with this one, I can say that a couple years ago, we had made the decision to do the drilling, the directional drillings, rather than going up Great Neck. And if I remember correctly, not that this is any consolation, but if I remember correctly, it was about $800,000 in savings. I think it was like 680 to 800 and something $1,000 in savings. That doing it from one to the other. So I mean that there would have been a higher price to it, but I think that one we are looking for any possible ways to save on it. So
Correct.
If anything comes up, I'm sure we can.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was quite that much, but it was a significant cost savings for the project to do the route that we're doing right now. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Appreciate your input and expertise.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Andrews, back to your report. Thank you for your indulgence.
Madam Chair, of course, thank you, and through you to the members and the audience here tonight and those at home. If I could just move on to, I just wanted to give a further update. In your packet are a set of a really preliminary, a draft set of procedures, generally accepted procedures that the Land Donation Review Task Force would be using. We met on February 2nd to talk about these, to find ways to reinforce the process between the Conservation Department, Planning Department, Inspectional Services area, and assessing area. And so we came up with a draft land donation review process. I'd like the board to provide guidance or direction as you can take a look at it and tell us what you think about it. The committee is working hard to place on file and to get active with respect to potential land donations to the town, with an eye towards making certain that we have the appropriate procedures in place and any testing that might be necessary in that process.
I'm sorry, when would you like our suggestions or input on it?
By the end of the month, or if first
End of
week?
the month?
If that,
I thought you were going to say the end of the week. Oh.
does that work?
End of the week, I'll forget by the end of that month. Thank
But
you.
if we bring back our suggestions at the next meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Number 3, if I could just update on the leadership team. I did receive a tendered resignation from Sheila Scaduto, Director of Assessment, that she has pursued other opportunities. And I have a transition team working with former assessor, director of assessing, I should say, Mr. Rich Gonzalez, and the staff to put together a transition plan, and I will be posting this position in the near future. Item B, if I could, on the just an update on the Joint Budget Review Committee. If you look at the update, I did pay particular attention to not only Selectman Holmes' suggestion, but the entire board with respect to making certain that we have evening meetings. We are meeting on Friday, the 11th at 10 o'clock in the morning, but we will be working over the next several weeks, including February 15th at 5:30 p.m. before the board's regular meeting right here. And on the 23rd, hopefully at the auditorium, I will confirm that at the Wareham Middle School at 5:30 to give folks a chance to get out and to give us some ideas about what they're thinking with respect to the 2012 budget. And I think we'll be getting hopefully into the meat of things, Madam Chair, where there are some very important issues that we need to address moving forward as the budget process takes shape. If I could move to item C.
If we can stay
sorry.
on
I'm
item
sorry,
B for
Madam
just
Chair.
a second. Did either of our representatives have any input as to were there any discussions of substantive nature that you want to bring to the board in terms of proposals that were made?
Well, there haven't been proposals per se. Mr. Slavin and Mr. Trudell of the Capital Planning Committee sort of gave us an overview and an understanding of what, how the Capital Planning Committee came to be, what it's charged with, what the true cost is that we're facing over the next few years. And we talked a little bit about different, leasing versus buying. And I think at the end, there was no vote, but the consensus was that you have to look at each purchase on its own merits to make a decision as to what the most cost-effective way to obtain it would be. So, for example, it may make sense to lease police cruisers because of their relatively short lifespan. And it may make more sense to buy when you can borrow money cheap, other types of things. So while there was no real conclusion, there was just a general discussion about those different, bonding, leasing, purchasing, all those different things. And I think I left the room believing that we were going to look at every option for these large purchases to determine what's the most cost effective. I don't know if you left with a different impression. But that's not really the charge of this committee. That's, somebody else to analyze those.
No, I agree with Selectman Winslow that was essentially, it was an overview. I know that, I guess it was, for example, I guess it would be that at the school committee meeting, there was a reference made about purchasing 29 buses. And so that was what we kind of went in there waiting to see a capital plan of buying 29 buses in one swoop. They backed off, I don't say backed off, but said that, we probably don't need to buy more than like 5 buses a year. That was where I would say that's what they were looking at and coming from. I think that there has to be a deeper discussion about that because I had, and it was, let me just also say that it was an abbreviated meeting. It didn't run for much more than an hour, so there wasn't a lot of discussion, but that was really the main focus, I think.
The basic intent of running over the capital plan with the committee was, I know the Finance Committee is intimately aware of the capital plan and Mr. Andrews' budget. We tried to prioritize the items that are up front in the capital plan, but I think that would be to my thinking that it might possibly be just to point out the fact that we've got, I don't know, how many millions of dollars in backlogged capital planning items? We have had no capital planning committee or spending for the past 10 years, so I think that perhaps it was to note the importance of maintaining a capital plan and keeping funding in our budget for capital items. Was that a goal of presenting the capital plan, Mr.
Madam Chair?
Andrews?
Yes, it was. And in fact, I think it was also an opportunity to understand that we have been on a theme, at least of the past year, of public safety. And we talked about the need to stay on the capital plan, whether it be leasing or some longer-term payment, to replace our older cruisers that are not functioning as they should be, as well as items that I have put into my capital plan suggestion going forward with respect to ambulance for the emergency medical response team. But also to gain an understanding, I think, of some of the longer-term capital needs on the school side. So it was good discussion with regards to the Massachusetts School Building Authority and what they would be needing in terms of moving the Minot School renovation project forward. So I believe both Chair Slavin and Chair Trudell was trying to put that out there as ideas, and to Member Winslow's point that, how do we get there? How do you keep on a plan that we've started? Because I certainly believe very strongly, wholeheartedly, that you can't just, fix the problem for capital needs one year, particularly where it relates to police cruisers, and then, not fund them or release them for a couple of years. That's why they're in the budget that I presented to this board. And I strongly believe that we have to take into consideration the timing of some of the other capital requests and needs, as you have quite appropriately stated, that have gone without funding for some time. So I think that was a robust discussion that we had, and people have different ideas about how to move forward. But I believe that the progression of the discussion on capital helped us understand that we need to have a program that is realistic from year to year and that does attend to our most pressing needs, as I've indicated, in my opinion, mostly in public safety.
And Madam Chair, just so that you know, one of the members of the Budget Subcommittee, who's a Finance Committee member, Mr. Frank Heath, had suggested that the board, in fact, develop a policy for capital planning. I mean, some communities allocate a percentage of their operating budget every year to capital purchases. Others, allocate all free cash or things like that. And that may be something that we should look at in terms of, how are we going to, and there were a lot of great ideas that were thrown around. I mean, in today's economy, money's cheap. Do you pick one of the big ones and bond for it now while the money's cheap? Do you, there was a lot of very good discussion about the different things. What Mr. Andrews, when he mentioned the School Building Authority, if the state actually picks Wareham schools, we have to immediately come up with a sum of money.
$500,000.
$500,000. I didn't remember what it was off the top of my head. So that's something that we always have to keep kind of in the back of our minds as we fill out these applications, which I quite honestly wasn't aware of. I mean, it's a great program because such a large percentage of it gets, covered, but we got to come up with that money.
Well, you can bond for it or you can borrow it. You don't have to come up with it out of your operating budget, obviously, but.
Well, no, but that was what the discussion was about, while we all talk about what a great thing it is, does the general public realize that then, there's this like little caveat to it once you get your approval. So I think it's a good exercise in really looking at these different items in the long-term, 5-10 year plan.
And Mr. Andrews,
yes, Madam Chair.
what percentage of the budget would you say for 2012 or 2011, if you know that figure off the top of your head, have we set aside for capital plan this year and next year?
We haven't built it into the plan yet, Madam Chair, but I'd say it's within 1 to 3%. That we have a pretty low debt service at this particular juncture. The question is, how do we plan that out going forward? The suggestions that the recommendations that I've made on the capital planning side once again, could be financed a couple of different ways, but mostly through the capital program, which I believe should be done each year to stay up with the times. I mean, you can't have a big capital program and then back off of it for a couple of years for things, as I've indicated in
I
public
agree.
safety.
I think with the consensus of the board, I'd like to ask you to come back to us with a recommendation as to what percentage of the budget we may want to set aside as a policy on capital planning costs for the future. And
Happy to.
And also along those lines, we might want to look at that for our stabilization fund, something like that, setting a 1 to 3% figure out of our growth.
Sure. Out of new growth.
Does the board have any question about that type of policy or concern about setting that type of policy?
I don't have that type of, any concern about that for stabilization for new growth. My only concern with capital planning is that if the Board of Selectmen sets a policy at 3%, 5%, and while we may never get here, but when we get to the point where some of these major things are, I mean, I guess the board would have to turn around and take a look and change that. My understanding is, and maybe I'm wrong, but, the Capital Planning Committee is appointed, there are, I believe, 4 seats on it by virtue of their positions: town administrator, town accountant, member of the Finance Committee, and member of the Planning Board. And then there's a few members at large that are appointed by the appointing authority that consists of the chairman of the Board of Selectmen, the chairman of the Finance Committee, and the town moderator. And to me, that would indicate that it is essentially a legislative function, or it's it's representative of town meeting, those 3 at large. And so I would like to have, seeing it's a member of the Finance Committee, seeing it's the town accountant, seeing it's the town administrator, rather than us setting a policy of, we want you to set aside this much. I would like to get their feedback on exactly what they think that it should be, because not that we can't set a policy, but I think that the way it's set up in the charter is really that they report more or less, give us the information, give the town body the information, rather than us dictating.
Right. Well, I wasn't suggesting dictating. I think I asked Mr. Andrews to come back to us with a recommendation.
No, I was just,
so that we would know.
I wasn't accusing you. I'm just saying that I
right.
wanted to make it clear out there that
Absolutely, I
because
appreciate
there was some, I don't want to say criticism, but that was it. Well, why doesn't the Board of Selectmen have this policy? And that the board, well, I think that it has to come the other way as well. So that's all.
Well, and Madam Chair, I just, what I took away from what Mr. Heath said was that this policy was more of a guide, in creating the budget annually, that this was, kind of where we were,
That's
like
what a policy is, a guide.
Yeah,
yes.
it wasn't going to be, some hard,
Set in
steadfast,
stone, no.
You have to spend this amount of money on capital, capital items. And certainly, unfortunately, when times get tough, if they were to get tough again, then town meeting would certainly have, the ability to decide that they didn't, want to set aside, but.
Right, absolutely, because you can set a policy and then you bring it to town meeting and they may choose to vote differently. That's always a possibility because everything has to go before them. But I think, Mr. Andrews, you have the point to go back to the Capital Planning Committee and look at your plan and come up with what you think would be a reasonable policy. And
Sure.
then we'll work with you to try to meet that goal.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm happy to do that. I also think, Madam Chair, you made a very salient point earlier in the discussion on the budget. We really need to get into the meat of the budget so that we can understand time is ticking, and we're going to have to be able to move forward on budget at some point. And I think it's important also that residents and other constituencies join us, because I did hear very clearly last meeting, these meetings should be open, they should be accessible, they should be very much involving participation in town governance. I believe in that, as you know, and I think that's what we're heading towards with those evening meetings. If they have to be later, that's fine too. I don't mind scheduling additional meetings at later times. But I think the next 2 meetings after Friday, we should be able to get into some even discussion and hopefully publicize them. I talked to Bill Philman about that earlier, and getting some information out to the general public on that.
Okay. Mr. Andrews, you had mentioned to me that the topic of the meals tax had come up as a revenue side
Yes, Madam Chair.
proposal.
It's on the agenda for Friday morning, and the discussion of the group and recommendation should, as we have discussed, go back to each of the bodies and come up with some indication as to how best to proceed. It is an option. It's about $402,000 going forward, and let's talk about it. I mean, if it's on the table for discussion, should be something that should be fully vetted and discussed openly at that level. And once again, coming back to the respective bodies for input back from both the school committee and the finance committee and the board of selectmen.
Any discussion on the meals tax possibility? Mrs. Winslow?
The problem with the meals taxes, as I see it, and I felt this way for quite some time now, is that it's not something that is really all around us yet. And my concern is always, Plymouth had actually passed it at their town meeting, but then it was challenged, and I'm not sure where that ever ended up, but if it's even been resolved. If the meals tax was, kind of all around us with our neighbors, then it really wouldn't make a difference. And would I personally drive out of town to save, a quarter? No, but I think that the perception that you're paying a higher tax is sometimes not a good thing, especially in a seasonal community that relies heavily on tourism. There were some studies done, I guess probably now about a year and a half ago, that when the sales tax was raised, the 1.25%, that there was a drop in, comparative sales. It was published in, I think, the Patriot Ledger. That's the psychological impact. Whether it really adds up to a whole lot to an individual doesn't seem to make a difference. If people think they're being taxed higher, then they're less likely to make a purchase. That's my concern. My big concern is that we bring people in, they spend as much money as they can over the few months that they have here in the businesses. That's what I want to have happen. Grow the businesses, that will create additional revenue. Now, if the meals tax starts popping up all over the place, then, I think it's a good idea. But for right now, that's not where we want to be the leader.
I'm not suggesting that, but
Mr. Cruz? Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Andrews.
I was just responding to Kara's point, sorry, Member Winslow's point.
Mrs. Ekstrom? I'm just going to say that, I've been in favor of the meals tax since it came up. I mean, I don't think we can afford to shun any revenue source, and the meals tax is a discretionary tax for most people. You choose to go out to eat. You don't go out to eat. You don't pay the tax. But however, and it's pennies, and most diners are going to a restaurant for a specific reason, because they want that food, that place, and they want that pizza and not that pizza, and they don't care if they have to pay 25 cents more, because that's all about it amounts to on a $50 bill. So we have so many destination restaurants in our town. So many people come here from other places just to eat at our restaurants. The ones at Wareham Crossings, people come from out of town to shop, and then they eat. They come to, don't want to give anybody a plug, but maybe I could give a few restaurants a plug.
Yeah, don't.
They come to a lot of restaurants. We all know who are friends who come from out of town, and when they come, they know which restaurant they want to go to eat at. And we have a lot of those restaurants, and we're fortunate to have a number of chain restaurants in town that aren't in our surrounding towns. So people do come here to eat from other places, and obviously in the summertime. And I mean, you're talking about pennies on the dollar, and yes, I know that it might make a big splash initially, and then it dies off, and people go pay the extra 7/10 of a penny or whatever it is, and it's totally forgotten down the road. So, I mean, it's $400,000. It's $200,000 for the schools by law, $200,000 to the town. I just don't think that we, in this town, again, we don't have the luxury of turning our noses up at any potential revenue sources. And we're already got the budget cut by 9% below last year's budget. You know, I mean, that's just my thought on it. And if the ad hoc committee, well, first of all, we have to come to some consensus as a board as to whether or not we would want to go along with this as part of the ad hoc committee proposal. And also, we would be responsible for placing the article on the warrant. So, this is
Maybe
extra.
I'm sorry, maybe I missed something, or, because my understanding was that the recommendation of doing this meals tax was, but that all of the revenues would go to the schools. That is what, isn't that what was suggested?
I don't believe, well, I'm not sure what was suggested in the past, but there is an option here to frame it in such a way.
I mean, we should check that out, because my understanding was that is what Dr. Rabinovich said. And, you know, I mean, personally, I understand that it's, you know, only a penny here or there. I was against it. I'm against it. But I think that if we are going to go forward with it, it's going to be used for the schools. I mean, one of the things is that, you know, everyone is tightening their belts. Everyone has to learn to live within their means. And that, you know, when we're faced with things like this, I do understand it's only a few cents here or there or whatever, and those pennies do add up, you know, to be something meaningful. But it's also those few extra pennies here and there also add up coming out of people's pockets, and that can also end up to be something. And, you know, when we looked at it last time, I said, you know, to the waitress that makes $3 an hour, you know, those extra few cents in it, you know, that someone leaves a 20 in the, you know, the bill's $18.80 versus $18.83 or something, you know, that few extra cents over the course of a night will add up to $1 or something. And, you know, and that might be the difference in her getting, especially with gas right now, having, you know, gas to get back and forth to the job one day. So I'm not a big favor of it. I absolutely understand the theory behind it. But if the schools want to take on that challenge, because and if I'm mistaken, I apologize, but I thought that what they wanted to do was do the meals tax and have all of the revenues go to the schools. So, but we should check that out.
Madam Chair, I will check that out.
Okay, well, I'll expect to hear back. We'll be waiting to hear back what the actual proposal is, and at least we've hashed it out a little bit here. It seems like we've got a split decision from the board at this point, but Mr. Cruz, would you like to weigh in?
When you start talking about taxes, if anybody's been to Phoenix, Arizona, as soon as you fly in, what are you doing? You're paying taxes. It's either for the airport or for the stadium. So taxes are going to be taxes. And if you go out to eat, it's 20% tip. So if you're not going to tip...
Oh, I want to wait on you.
Well, good. Well, Sunday we went out and I must have gave 50% tip. But it was my wife's birthday, so...
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Joella.
So taxes are an evil thing, and we have to live with it. And if we want things in this town to keep on flourishing, we need to do it.
Off the sweat of other people's back, though.
What was that?
Off the sweat of other people's back, though.
It's off the sweat of the people's back, but everything's off the sweat of the people's back.
You're the minority back.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could move on.
Please, next topic.
Madam Chair, on item C, I just wanted the board and the listening public to understand that we are working very hard at upgrading our emergency call tree. This is when Mr. Gifford, Dr. Rabinovich, myself talk at some early hour, like around 4 o'clock in the morning, maybe even earlier sometimes, about snow blizzard preparations and when the snow plows will be going out and the sanders will be going out. And I am working very hard to make certain we can get up onto the Chiron, the TV stations, not only when the school district is closed, but when we have delay openings or sometimes closings of town hall in other town buildings. So that if people were coming for something, that they would be well aware, and, of course, we're all watching TV 4, 5, 7, 25, whatever else, to make sure that that gets up there. And that's one of my working projects as we speak, because we should have that ability to get that up there. It's on the website. It's, we get to the radio stations, but really people, like to see it on TV, and I'm trying to get that accomplished, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, on item D, I have spoken with each of the members of the board, and we are working on a transition plan with respect to legal services. As you know, Rich Bowen, who is a lead attorney for Copeland and Page, has left the company and has gone about a different direction. And I also have asked Attorney Alana Quirk to provide the board and myself with an update on legal services. We're kind of in that bridge position, and you may or may not know the town uses various lawyers in various areas. Attorney John Witten does a lot of land use work. Attorney Ray Mayeras does work with the Community and Economic Development Agency. And I'm looking at this with an eye towards bringing down our costs for legal services, because I know that's been talked about and worked on for some time, and I intend to get additional results for the town and obviously working through the board. I know the Finance Committee has been working very hard at that, and so I'll keep you posted on where things stand as soon as we get the updated report on legal matters from Attorney Quirk, who I've been in touch with, and I'll keep you posted, and your guidance and advice is appreciated.
If I may, Madam Chair, on that one, under the charter, it is the Board of Selectmen's duty to annually appoint town council. And I was just wondering how the board felt about possibly asking Mr. Andrews if he could send out, it doesn't have to be like an official RFP, because legal services is one of the things that you don't have to follow 30B procurement law with. But perhaps you've just mentioned a couple of people that we use right now, some special counsel, that we've had experience with or whatever, that if maybe you could send out a thing and just say that, in March, the Board of Selectmen has to appoint counsel, and see if we can get any, I know that we had one of them, I won't say who it was, but in the past who had offered, I think it was like one flat rate, and only went into anything else if it was litigation or something like that, but see if we can get kind of like a synopsis of what they'll offer, whatever, because I think there are a few that we've had dealings with, just to, so that we would have that information, so that, come around March, if we want to have that discussion.
Sure.
If that was the board, I don't know.
I have no problem with that. I think it's an excellent idea. I would have suggested it myself if you didn't mention it. I think that it's a good idea for us to shop around a little bit. As Mr. Andrews said, we will have Copeland and Page, Ilana Quirk coming in to brief the board in executive session as to what we've got for ongoing legal services with them, and by charter, we have to do it anyway, so it'd be nice to have some additional information on that.
I'm sure I'd be happy to do that, Madam Chairman.
I mean, Copeland and Page has been very gracious this past year. They've provided us with some pro bono services every other Friday. That was very, very good for the town. It did save us a lot of money, and town department heads were able to go in and get their questions answered on every other Friday, and that was helpful in keeping the costs down, and thank you, Mr. Andrews, for arranging that with them.
You're welcome, Madam Chair.
And so, if nobody else has any objection, then I think we'll head down that path, if you would.
Well, and I was saying, ask also if any of the selectmen have a suggestion of counsel that they may know through other municipalities or something like that, may have some experience with them. And maybe, like I said, maybe a half a dozen or something, or 4 to 6. Thank you.
Happy to, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, just on status report, once again, to expedite, we are finalizing, once again, the management action plan, which is well over 90%. The Cranberry Commons Task Force did not meet this past week, although I have been in touch with Mr. Ferry regarding the build-out of his property on Cranberry Highway. I am working closely with the chief. I did see that he scurried out of here pretty quick. Didn't wait to talk with me after the meeting, but I will track him down and continue my discussions with him. The Model Regional Recreation Program is still on hold. We're looking at ways to bring recreation back to the town in a very cost-effective or no-cost way to get that program up and running. We are looking at the proposals that have been made for the upgrade of Town Hall with regards to the computer systems, and I'll keep you posted. And once again, are exploring software for business certificate tracking through both the inspectional services area and also the town clerk. And I did give you an update on the land donation review task force, as we had also talked about some of the proposals by the governor in his submission of House 1 for the fiscal 2012 budget. We are looking at, you should have a monthly activity report of licensed businesses. January report will be completed and attached for your further understanding and review. And that, unless there's any other questions, Madam Chair, concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Westfield discussion, is there anything to be discussed on Westfield this evening? Any other town business? Mr. Cruz, do you have any other town business this evening?
Madam Chair, not any other town business, but I wanted to compliment Mr. Andrews on the certification with the police department. When the certification team came to the police station to do this certification, they were surprised to see the town administrator walking in with a selectman. I won't tell you who that was.
Mr. Cruz, thank you for
a lot of
going.
times they go and they don't get that involvement with the town. And same thing happened when we went to Hopkinton. Of all the police departments, there were 6 getting certified, 5 of them, and then one of them was getting accreditation. And of all of them, we were the only town leaders that were supporting their police department that was there. So that's hats off to the town of Wareham.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Cruz. Thank you, Mr. Andrews. Mrs. Ekstrom?
Thank you, Madam Chair. As many of you know, the Board of Selectmen had discussed coming up with a Stop the Violence rally. Right now, tentatively, we have good news, is that the date tentatively is February 18th at 6:30 p.m. at the high school auditorium. There is a girls' basketball game that is going to be in the gym at 5 o'clock. It should get out right around 6:30, and the public is welcome to join in the auditorium. And the reason why I say tentatively is we are still working on the speakers, but this will be a Stop the Violence, Increase the Peace rally. So if you can mark your calendars, and hopefully we will have more information out. I've spoken to a couple of members of the media, and we'll get the specifics out as soon as we can once we have them all, and we'll have more information for you next week here. So I'm very excited. It's been a wonderful opportunity. We had the first night, I'd say we had probably 25, 30 people show up. Everything from nonprofits in the community, businesses, individuals that were just concerned about what was going on. Businesses big and small. The following week we had another meeting, and it was a lot of the same people and several new faces, and I think it's going to be a great thing for the community. So, we'll have more information about it as it becomes available.
There will be food.
Yes, there will be food.
There will be food, and there will be speakers, and there will be lots of information on different programs that members of the community of all ages can become involved with, the different programs that we're looking at. School department, clergy, probation department, the police department, a number of youth organizations are involved. Everybody is really interested in the Scotty Montero Foundation, who's taken a very active role in even getting a jump start on the town of Wareham, and are so excited that we are joining in with them. They are sponsoring programs at the high school with the money that they've raised in their foundation for our students, and
What are those?
It's just
I would say Rachel.
it's the Rachel's Challenge. Rachel was the young lady, the first young lady who was killed in the Columbine tragedy, and her parents started an organization to promote Rachel's themes of peace and kindness and goodwill. And then there's the Katie Brown program. Katie Brown was a young lady who was abused by her partner who strangled her, and it teaches young people about relationships and respect for one another. And so the Scotty Montero Foundation has donated the money to the school to put those events on. They'll be coming up. The school is also doing another program on bullying, cyberbullying for the parents on February 15th. We'll be getting out a lot more information. We're looking at long-term, short-term programs. I mean, Mrs. Ekstrom has, pioneered this and pulled people together, and it is really encouraging to see how the community has responded. We have folks who are going to be donating food, materials, money, and as I said, we'll have some short-term, midterm, and long-term goals, and it's really encouraging that the community is coming together on this increasing the peace, because it's so important for us to have that level of civility and respect for all generations.
Throughout the community.
Throughout the community, so thank you, Mrs. Ekstrom, for
Thank
really
you.
getting that jump started.
That's all I have.
Anybody other?
This isn't really any other town business. This is going back to Mr. Andrews and the Budget Subcommittee. Mr. Andrews, I have the 15th and March 1st. I don't have any meetings that week of school vacation. I think we talked about it.
Was not the 23rd on the docket? No? Did we take
No,
that?
it's the 15th and the 1st.
You know what, you're right.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I
So,
apologize, yeah.
just so the community knows it's the 15th,
Because
and both
they're
of
not
them.
meeting. They're not
Right.
meeting
That is
because.
correct. Okay.
So it's the first.
Maybe 15th and the 2nd?
No, the 15th and the 1st, and both of them are in the Selectmen's meeting
For
room.
us, okay.
And we had talked about maybe after that, switching over to the schools and
Yeah, well,
such.
thank you for checking your calendar. On the subject of I know I skipped right over it, the town administrator evaluation, board members, I was thinking that because of Mr. Holmes's absence, that we would delay that until next week unless anybody has a burning desire to make any comments this evening, other than the nice words that we heard already this evening. I would like to suggest that we move that to next week.
I think that would be.
I know Mr. Holmes would like to participate.
Yeah, I think that would be only fair. So.
Okay, do we have any liaison reports? Hearing none? All right, last chance, anybody? Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, ladies and
Good
gentlemen.
night.
And thank you for your
Come
support.
back next week.